You know, growing up as a millennial, there was something that I felt like I couldn't escape, and that was just the constant onslaught of people from various other generations saying, oh, well, those millennials, they're just so entitled. They don't want to have to work for anything. They've just had it so easy. And because of that sense of entitlement, they would point at individuals, you know, saying, well, I want this, or I feel like I'm entitled to that. And they would say, well, that comes from that sense of entitlement. Now, whether those generational stereotypes are true or untrue, you can take that exact same kind of mentality and you can apply it to many of our own lives, just as individuals, because I think many of us feel like we are somewhat entitled to things. I mean, after all, if we work really hard at our jobs, we expect, you know, we feel we are entitled to some form of compensation, maybe even promotion. You know, there are certain things that in society we feel that we are entitled to in terms of basic, you know, rights and dignities. There may be things that we feel like we have worked very hard to establish with our friends and family that maybe means that we are entitled to some kind of relationship. But that starts breaking down when we start looking at God, because after all, what have we done to earn our sense of entitlement when it comes to the things of God? I mean, what did we do? After all, God created all things. I mean, if it wasn't for what God created, there would be no thing for which we could be entitled. You know, I think this is one of the reasons why you end up seeing Paul talk so much about giving thanks. And it's something that I feel like we really struggle with, especially in our society today. When you read the end of Paul's first letter to the Thessalonians, he says this. He says, rejoice always, pray constantly, and give thanks in everything. For this is God's will for you in Jesus Christ. When Paul writes these words, it's an echo of things that he writes throughout several of his other epistles, where he tells people to rejoice and to give thanks. And I think what's even crazier is when you consider the fact that he is writing these things oftentimes when he is in a sense of being imprisoned or when he is struggling. In some instances, he's writing these letters talking about rejoicing and giving thanks, even in the midst of fearing for his life or perhaps even being at the end of his own life. But yet he still found reason to give thanks. And when you compare that to what many of us will use to explain why maybe we aren't more thankful, all of a sudden, maybe we start seeming a little bit entitled. When you start looking at this idea of being thankful, it starts really driving home where you place your sense of dominion. And let me explain that. I mean, if God has dominion over all things, then you understand that anything that you have, that you can experience, that you can enjoy is only there because God, through his dominion, has permitted us to be able to enjoy that thing. So in other words, all blessings come from God. Now, that also works the opposite way too. If all blessings come from God because God has dominion over that thing and we have no entitlement to it, it's God through his generosity, his graciousness has given us that, then when we don't have something, it's not that God took it away. It's that we don't have any entitlement to that thing. And so we have to trust that he who has dominion has some better plan for those things. This is something that can sound a certain way when we're talking about material goods, when we're talking about wealth, when we're talking about houses and properties and things like that. But what about when you're talking about relationships with people? What about when you're talking about the loss of a loved one? People have all kinds of reasons in their head to say that, you know, I don't feel very thankful towards my God. But if you were to actually boil down the reasons for that lack of thankfulness, I think what you would find is it's because individuals hold some claim in their hearts to a thing that they don't own. And this is actually the greatest irony, and the world try to convince you that you are entitled, that you are owed, that you deserve certain things, is that the world will convince you over and over and over again that you are entitled to this, that this is something that you are right to feel angry if you don't possess a thing, a person, an attribute. But yet that world has no dominion over those things that it claims that you're deserved. However, God, who does have dominion over all things, God, whose mere presence proves to you that you are not owed anything, gives so much and asks for nothing in return. When we talk about thankfulness, we have to talk about the story of Jonah and the whale, and not necessarily the Jonah and the whale part. Most of you are familiar with at least what I call the Vacation Bible School level of this story. It's basically chapters 1, 2, and 3 of the book of Jonah. Jonah, he's told he needs to go somewhere because, to the city of Nineveh, tell them they've been bad, God's going to destroy it. He decides he's not going to do that. He tries running away. While he's running away, things go terrible. He ends up repenting, throwing himself into the water. As he throws himself into the water, a fish swallows him up. He ends up getting spat out on the shore, delivering the message to the city of Nineveh, who then repents, and then God relents his judgment from that city. We're caught up chapters 1, 2, and 3. Now, when you get to chapter 4, which is one that people don't spend a lot of time on, I think you get to something interesting specific to the subject of thankfulness. You see, Jonah was understandably very agitated. He was going to be the divine instrument of God's justice. And yet, God relented on this city. And so Jonah ends up questioning why any of this was even necessary. It wasn't fair. And so instead of looking and having a sense of maybe thankfulness that God spared a bunch of people, or a sense of thankfulness that God carried him through on his mission that he called him to do, or a sense of thankfulness that he was able to experience being used by God, he ignored all of those blessings and instead was mad because he thought his mission should have had purpose. He was owed that ending that he thought was going to happen with Nineveh getting destroyed. And God asks a very important question. Is it right for you to be angry? That is the question I think a lot of us, especially in moments, or if we just kind of perpetually live in a state of thanklessness, we have to ask ourselves, is it right for you to be thankless? Is it right for you to feel like you're owed this thing? Is it right for you to feel like you are entitled? And on a surface level, maybe at a human, societal, cultural level, you may say yes, because you come up with all these different reasons about, various things you think you're entitled to, or because you worked hard on it, or anything like that. But I want you to think about things outside of your own existence, because this world is a lot bigger than just you. If you think about things outside of your own existence, then all of a sudden you start getting to things where you say, well, wait, who enabled any of this? Who gave me the skills to do something? Who put me in a place where I could even have the opportunity to go out for that job? Who put that person in my life so I could even enjoy their presence for a season? Who is it that created all things so that I may be able to enjoy a piece of it? I did nothing to create any of that, so what makes me entitled to it? That is kind of the mentality that Jonah struggles with. And it's something that you'll sit here and read here just a second as you guys in your small groups read Jonah 4, that God demonstrates to Jonah this very mentality. The reality is that when we look at many of the reasons why we excuse ourselves from feeling thankful towards God, we end up realizing that we are feeling entitled to something that we did nothing to create, that we haven't cultivated, and that really our contributions to it were really just collateral to the opportunity and the blessing that God gave us in the first place. And if that's the case, then why is it that we focus so much on the thing that we didn't get, that we thought we were deserved, rather than those things that God did give us along the way? Why do we complain so much about not getting the end state that we wanted, and we ignore all the blessings that God gave us from the beginning all the way up to that point? I'll tell you right now that one of the most difficult things that I have to deal with as a pastor is anything related to end-of-life care. It's one of those aspects of the job that I oftentimes will somewhat joke with people that no one prepares you for that when you say, oh, I want to go be a pastor. You think about the things that are a little bit more glorious, right? You think about, doing baptisms. You think about having opportunities to share about the gospel with different people. You think about, going up and being able to preach the word, to be able to teach people things so they say like, man, that really changed my life. But, oftentimes there's not a whole lot of stuff that's really glorious about some of those final scenes that take place. And I think in doing that, it's easy to get overwhelmed by feelings of thanklessness, whether with yourself or whether with, other individuals that are around you, people who are experiencing, going through these very, very tough times. And it's only natural that they themselves will sit here and in that moment won't see many reasons to be thankful. But even in those moments where we feel like everything is being taken away from us, oftentimes, we're still reminded about how much God has given us. We're reminded about how much God has blessed us tremendously. We're reminded about how many opportunities God has given us to enjoy the company that we have around us. And if it's true of something as serious as an individual's life, then how much less important are all the other things that we will use to say, I am not thankful? How much less important is the fact that I didn't get a promotion, that I didn't get some deal, that, maybe something monetarily or in terms of my possessions didn't happen the way I wanted, that there may be some injustice that I feel like I'm living out. There's so many things that if we listen to the world, we can trick ourselves into thinking that we don't have anything to be thankful for. But I think what we'll find when we stop and realize that we're not owed anything is that we live in an immensely blessed time. We have roofs over our heads. We have food. We have water. We have each other. We are rich. We have so much to be thankful for. And if you ever for a moment start doubting that you have any reason to be thankful to your God, just remember your opportunity that you have to reflect on the things you wish you had is something that so many people don't even have. So give thanks. Or as Paul would say, rejoice always, pray constantly, and give thanks in everything. For this is God's will in your life in Jesus Christ. This is the lesson we have for you today. I hope you're able to get something out of it. Until we can meet again, God bless.